Have you ever had a feeling that someone was lying to you, but you couldn't prove it? Maybe it was a friend saying, "I'm fine," while their voice felt empty. Maybe it was a politician making promises that sounded too perfect. Or maybe you've looked into someone's eyes and felt that strange discomfort in your chest, like your brain noticed something your conscious mind missed. The terrifying truth is this: humans are natural liars, and according to psychological studies, most people lie multiple times a day. Some lies are harmless, some lies destroy relationships, and some lies are so convincing they can change history itself. But here's the question nobody asks. If lying is verbal, why does the body panic while doing it? Why do certain people touch their face more? Why does the voice slightly change? Why do some people blink faster while others suddenly become perfectly still? And most importantly, can you actually learn the language of a liar? Tonight, we're diving deep into the psychology, neuroscience, and hidden behavior patterns behind deception. Because lies don't just come out of the mouth, they leak out of the body. Scientists call these leakage behaviors tiny unconscious signals the brain struggles to control while fabricating reality. And once you learn to spot them, you may never look at people the same way again. Think about this. When humans lie, the brain has to perform an incredibly difficult task. It must create false information, hide the truth, predict your reaction, maintain emotional control, and keep the story consistent. All at the same time, that pressure creates cognitive overload. And when the brain becomes overloaded, the body starts betraying the liar. This is why lying is mentally exhausting. In brain imaging studies, researchers found that deception activates areas of the prefrontal cortex associated with decision-making, self-control, and conflict management. In simple words, the brain works harder when it lies than when it tells the truth. Truth is memory. A lie is construction. And construction takes energy. That's why many liars accidentally reveal themselves in strange ways. Not because they want to confess, but because the human nervous system was never designed to comfortably live inside false reality. Now here's where things become disturbing. Most people think liars look nervous, but expert manipulators often appear calm. Why? Because experienced liars don't fear the lie. They fear being caught. And once a person repeatedly lies without consequences, the brain adapts. This is called desensitization. Over time, guilt weakens, stress decreases, and the lie becomes easier to maintain. In fact, neuroscientists discovered something shocking. The amygdala, the emotional center of the brain responsible for guilt and fear, becomes less reactive the more someone lies. Meaning the first lie feels uncomfortable, the 10th lie feels easier, and eventually, deception can become natural. That's why some of the most dangerous liars are not emotional. They're practiced, but even skilled liars have patterns. Because no human being can completely control unconscious behavior. For example, one of the most common signs of deception is called distancing language. Instead of saying, "I broke the vase," a liar may say, "The vase got broken." Notice the difference? The brain subtly distances itself from responsibility. Psychologists have observed this pattern in criminal interrogations, political speeches, and even everyday conversations. Liars often avoid ownership because language reflects psychology, and psychology reflects internal conflict. But words are only half the story. The body speaks too, and sometimes much louder than the mouth. The human body is constantly communicating, even in silence. Your posture speaks. Your eyes speak, your hands speak, and when someone lies, their body enters a hidden battle between control and exposure. This is where things become fascinating, because the body doesn't always reveal lies through obvious nervousness. Sometimes the biggest clue is unnatural control. A truthful person usually behaves naturally. Their expressions flow freely. Their movements are relaxed. But a liar often becomes hyper-aware of themselves, almost like an actor trying too hard to stay in character. And that creates behavioral stiffness. You may notice reduced hand movement, forced eye contact, overly controlled facial expressions, or strange pauses before answering simple questions. Because lying requires monitoring, the liar is not only speaking to you, they are constantly speaking to themselves. Don't look nervous. Stay calm. Don't mess up the story. And that internal pressure creates microscopic cracks in behavior. Psychologists call these microexpressions, tiny facial expressions that appear for a fraction of a second before the brain suppresses them. A flash of fear, a quick look of contempt, a brief expression of guilt. They happen so fast most people never consciously notice them, but your subconscious brain often does. That's why you sometimes distrust someone without knowing why. Your brain detected emotional inconsistency before your conscious mind could explain it. And here's something even more disturbing. Research suggests humans are actually terrible at detecting lies. Most people perform barely better than random guessing. Even trained professionals struggle. Why? Because we believe confidence equals truth. But confidence has nothing to do with honesty. Some of the biggest liars in history were incredibly charismatic. They spoke smoothly, maintained eye contact, and appeared emotionally convincing. Because humans trust certainty, not accuracy. This is why manipulation works. A skilled liar understands psychology better than the average person understands themselves. They know humans crave emotional comfort, and people often prefer a beautiful lie over an uncomfortable truth. But deception becomes even more powerful when emotion is involved, because emotions weaken critical thinking. Fear, love, anger, desperation. These emotions reduce logical analysis and increase suggestibility. That's why scammers create urgency. That's why toxic people use emotional guilt. And that's why manipulative individuals often mix truth with lies. Because the most believable lie is one partially connected to reality. In psychology, this is called truth embedding. The liar hides falsehood inside believable information, and your brain lowers its defenses because parts of the story feel familiar. It's psychological camouflage. Now, let's talk about one of the biggest myths about lying. Eye contact. People think liars avoid eye contact, but many experienced liars actually maintain too much eye contact, almost as if they're trying to force you to trust them, because they know society associates eye contact with honesty, so they overcompensate. This is why detecting deception is not about spotting one behavior. It's about noticing clusters of behaviors, changes from a person's normal baseline, a sudden shift in speech speed, a defensive tone, repeated touching of the neck, dry swallowing, voice cracking, delayed responses, contradictions. The real language of a liar is inconsistency. The mouth says one thing, the body whispers another, and the longer the lie continues, the harder it becomes to keep both stories aligned. But there's one terrifying reality most people never think about. What if the liar eventually believes their own lie? What if repetition can actually reshape memory itself? Because according to neuroscience, memory is far less reliable than you think. Your memories feel permanent, solid, untouchable. But scientifically, memory is surprisingly fragile. Every time you remember something, your brain doesn't replay it like a video recording. It reconstructs it, and during reconstruction, memories can change. Details can disappear. Emotions can distort reality, and false information can quietly enter the story. This is why repeated lies can eventually feel true, not only to others, but to the liar themselves. Psychologists call this the illusion of truth effect. The more the brain hears something repeatedly, the more familiar it becomes. And the brain often mistakes familiarity for accuracy. That means repetition can slowly overpower logic. This is why propaganda works, why misinformation spreads so easily, and why some people defend false beliefs with absolute confidence. Their brains stopped separating repetition from truth. Now imagine what happens when someone lies for years. At first, they remember the original truth. But over time, the brain begins prioritizing the repeated version instead. The fabricated story becomes emotionally easier to access. And eventually, the lie feels real, That's what makes human deception so dangerous. Not all liars are consciously evil. Some are trapped inside stories they repeated too many times. But there's another side to lying that few people talk about: the physical consequences. Because the body keeps score even when the mind tries to escape. Chronic deception creates stress, and stress changes biology. Increased cortisol levels, higher heart rate, muscle tension, sleep disruption, mental exhaustion. The nervous system constantly prepares for exposure. Forgetting details becomes terrifying. Unexpected questions create panic. And maintaining multiple false realities drains cognitive energy. That's why many chronic liars eventually become emotionally unstable. Not because the truth punishes them, but because the brain was never built to comfortably maintain contradiction forever. And then something strange happens. The liar begins lying automatically, not only to others, but to themselves. They deny obvious reality, rewrite past events, blame others, rationalize harmful behavior, because accepting the truth would collapse the identity they built around deception. This is especially common in narcissistic personalities, where protecting ego becomes more important than protecting truth. And when ego feels threatened, reality itself becomes negotiable. But here's the terrifying part. Sometimes the most convincing liar in your life is you. Humans constantly lie to themselves. I'm happy. I don't care. I'll change tomorrow. Everything is under control. Self-deception acts like psychological armor. It protects us from painful truths, but also traps us inside illusions. And the longer a person avoids truth, the more disconnected they become from themselves. That's why honesty is psychologically powerful. Not because truth is always comfortable, but because reality requires less energy to maintain. Truth doesn't need rehearsal. Truth doesn't fear exposure. Truth simply exists. And maybe that's why genuine people feel different. Their body is relaxed. Their emotions align with their words. Their behavior feels natural. Because authenticity creates internal harmony, while deception creates internal conflict. And humans can sense that conflict even without understanding it consciously. Which raises a chilling question. If lies leave psychological fingerprints, how many have you ignored in your own life? Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is lying. A fake smile, a rehearsed apology, a manipulated story, a promise they never intended to keep. And the unsettling truth is this. The most dangerous lies are rarely dramatic. They're subtle, quiet, emotionally intelligent, the kind that slowly reshape your perception without you realizing it. Because deception is not always about hiding facts. Sometimes it's about controlling reality itself, controlling what you doubt, what you remember, what you fear, and even who you become. That's why understanding the language of a liar is not about becoming paranoid. It's about becoming aware of behavioral inconsistencies, aware of emotional manipulation, aware of the hidden tension between words and truth. Because once you begin studying human behavior deeply, you stop listening only to what people say, and you start noticing what their mind is struggling to hide. But there's something important you must remember. No single gesture proves deception. Not avoiding eye contact, not nervousness, not fidgeting. Human beings are emotionally complex. Stress can look like guilt. Anxiety can look like dishonesty. And trauma can completely change behavior. Real psychological understanding requires observation, patience, and emotional intelligence, not judgment. The goal is not to become someone who suspects everyone. The goal is to become someone who understands people better. Because truth and lies exist inside every human being, even inside you. And maybe the deepest lesson here is this. The people who lie the most are often the people most disconnected from themselves. Every lie creates distance. Distance from others. Distance from reality. And eventually, distance from identity. That's why honesty feels freeing. Because truth removes the exhausting burden of performance. No mask to maintain. No story to remember. No fear of exposure. Just clarity. And perhaps that's the real language we all understand underneath everything else. Authenticity. So the next time someone speaks to you, don't only hear their words. Watch the timing, watch the emotion, watch the consistency between mind, body, and behavior. Because human beings reveal far more than they realize. And sometimes, silence tells the truth louder than speech ever could. If you enjoyed this video and want more deep psychological and scientific explorations of human behavior, manipulation, intelligence, and the hidden patterns of the mind, subscribe to the channel. And if this video made you think differently about someone in your life, or even about yourself, leave a comment and share your experience. Your perspective might help someone else notice something they've been ignoring for years. And if you know someone fascinated by psychology, body language, or the science of human behavior, share this video with them. Because understanding people may be one of the most important survival skills in the modern world. I'll see you in the next video.